Be me, professional historical preservation consultant. I handle projects for the city, the county, and private clients in some of the oldest, most tightly regulated historical districts. My specialty is navigating incredibly vague 50-year-old bylaws, the kind written before cars were even a major consideration for residential planning. I run my own small firm, Heritage Preservation and Consulting, which means my work vehicle, a rather robust but clearly marked cargo van, is my mobile office. Be not me, Miss Albright, my across-the-street neighbor, new to our quiet Old Mill Creek Estates neighborhood but already on the HOA board. She's a recent transplant from a gated community with strict covenants. She carries herself with an air of unshakable entitlement, viewing our public street as her personal driveway extension. Her meticulously manicured lawn and perpetually polished luxury sedan seem to imbue her with an imagined authority over everything in sight. She arrived like a storm, full of opinions and a burning desire to clean up the neighborhood. My van, legally parked on the public street outside my home, became her primary target. It's a work vehicle, yes, but it's crucial for my job. I'm often loading and unloading equipment, and it saves me time and effort to have it close. The street has no parking restrictions. It is not metered. There are no yellow curbs or fire hydrants. Her first attempt at cleaning up came just 2 weeks after she moved in. I was loading some surveying equipment, a heavy transit and tripod, into the van. She marched across the street, high heels clicking sharply on the asphalt. Her expression was a tight, disapproving frown. "Excuse me," she stated, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is that your vehicle?" She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at my van. "It's quite an eyesore, don't you think? This isn't a commercial district. We have standards here." I paused, carefully placing the transit. "It's my work vehicle, Miss Albright, and it's legally parked on a public street. I'm a resident." I offered a polite but firm smile. My internal monologue simply noted, "Ah, here we go." She bristled. "Well, perhaps we need to revisit what legally parked means for this community. The aesthetics are simply unacceptable. I'm on the HOA board now. I'll be looking into this." She huffed, then spun on her heel, returning to her immaculate home. I just shook my head, already anticipating the administrative nightmare she was about to unleash. A month later, the first official communication arrived. A brightly colored flyer slipped under my door, not in an envelope. It was an important notice from the Old Mill Creek Estates HOA board. It proclaimed, in bold, aggressive lettering, that commercial vehicles were strictly prohibited from overnight parking on community streets. It cited some obscure clause about maintaining property values. I read it, then reread it, pulling out my well-worn copy of the original Old Mill Creek Estates Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. I'd practically memorized the 1972 document for various projects. There was no mention of commercial vehicles. Zero. None. It specifically deferred street parking regulations to the city, as the streets were indeed public. I called the HOA management company. Their representative, a harried young woman named Sarah, confirmed my suspicions. "That notice wasn't approved by the full board," she admitted, her voice hushed. "Miss Albright drafted it herself and convinced 2 other new members to sign off. It's technically not enforceable." She sounded exhausted. "We've had a lot of spirited discussions since she joined." I thanked Sarah, filing away the information. I didn't engage Miss Albright directly on this one. I simply continued parking my van. It was a test, and I passed. She watched me, I knew she did. The blinds in her living room would twitch. Her car would sit perfectly angled in her driveway, a silent judgment. The next escalation came 3 months later. Miss Albright caught me outside, watering my small herb garden. She sauntered over, a forced pleasantness plastered on her face. "You know," she began, her tone falsely sweet, "I've been talking with some of the older residents. They remember when this neighborhood was truly pristine, before all the larger vehicles." I straightened up, turning off the hose. Miss Albright, my van is essential for my livelihood. It's not bothering anyone. It's not blocking driveways or traffic. I gestured to the wide, empty street. And it's a public street. Her smile tightened. Well, some of us feel it's a nuisance. It impacts our property values. We're considering a new resolution, a real one this time. Perhaps a designated parking area for such equipment. Farther away, of course. She practically purred the last sentence. I just nodded slowly. I see. I knew there was no designated parking area in our dense, historic neighborhood. She was suggesting I park my van, which weighs several thousand pounds and holds thousands in equipment, several blocks away and walk. This was about control. This was about her view. Her campaign grew more aggressive. She started taking pictures of my van. Not just my van, but any work truck, contractor vehicle, or even slightly older model sedan that dared park on her side of the street. She'd email them to the HOA management company, CCing every board member with urgent demands for enforcement. She was a self-appointed parking vigilante. I received a total of 5 official courtesy notices from the HOA management, each one a result of Miss Albright's incessant complaints. Each notice was promptly countered by my polite, but exhaustive, responses citing specific clauses from the original CC and RS, city ordinances regarding public streets, and even property law precedents. I was building a paper trail meticulously. My response emails were always CC'd to the entire board, including Miss Albright. I kept everything. Every email, every notice, every reply. Then came the breaking point. It was a Monday morning. I had a critical project, a structural survey of a collapsing foundation on an 1880s Victorian across town. My van was packed to the brim with specialized sensors, laser levels, and data loggers, all expensive, delicate equipment. I walked out my front door at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, ready for an early start. My van was gone. The entire street in front of my house was empty. My breath hitched. I checked up and down the block. Nothing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't right. I had parked it perfectly, exactly where I always did. I immediately checked my phone. No texts, no calls, no email from the city or HOA about towing. This was highly irregular. I called the non-emergency police line, explaining the situation. They confirmed no city-ordered tow had occurred. Then I called Sarah at the HOA management company. Her voice was strained, almost whispering. Oh God, I knew this would happen. She bypassed us. Miss Albright called Elite Towing Solutions directly. She told them the HOA authorized the tow, citing repeated parking violations on private HOA property. My blood ran cold. Private HOA property. Sarah, the street is public, you know this. I know, she practically wailed. I told her, the board told her, but she just went ahead anyway. She said she had unanimous board support, which is a lie. She probably just bullied the newest members into agreeing during a special meeting she called herself. I took a deep, steadying breath. Which tow yard? Sarah gave me the address. Elite Towing Solutions, a notoriously predatory company, known for its exorbitant fees and aggressive tactics. This was not an accident. This was an outright act of aggression. I immediately drove to the tow yard in my personal car. The van was there, looking utterly forlorn among a sea of abandoned vehicles. The tow fee was astronomical, $350 for the tow, plus a $75 per day storage fee. It had been less than 3 hours. When I protested, the yard attendant, a hulking man with a sneer, just shrugged. HOA order. You got a problem, take it up with them. I paid the fee. It hurt, but my equipment was worth exponentially more. As I drove my van home, a plan, cold and precise, began to form in my mind. Miss Albright had just activated a tripwire she didn't even know existed. She had stepped over a line. This was no longer just about a parking spot. This was about principle, about rules, and about the blatant abuse of perceived authority. I pulled out every document I had, every email from Miss Albright to the HOA, Every one of my replies, every single courtesy notice, and my detailed responses. I had meticulously documented every interaction, every instance of her overreach, and every time the HOA management had clarified the public nature of our streets. I had time-stamped photos of my van legally parked. I even had a copy of the official city street map, clearly delineating ownership. My master plan was simple but devastating: malicious compliance. Miss Albright believed she owned the street and could enforce her own rules. I would let her, but not without consequences. She wanted to prove the streets were HOA property for parking enforcement. I would let her officially claim they were. The current news story about an HOA in a neighboring county facing a class action lawsuit for illegally towing on public streets had been circulating for weeks. The key issue: the HOA had unilaterally decided public streets were theirs to regulate, leading to wrongful towing and massive fines. The city had confirmed the HOA had zero jurisdiction. This was the exact scenario Miss Albright was creating. I started by sending a carefully worded email to the HOA board, CCing Sarah and the property management company's legal counsel. I detailed the illegal tow, the predatory fees, and my professional opinion that Miss Albright's actions, and the HOA's implicit endorsement of them, were opening the association to significant legal liability. I cited the specific section of the city code confirming the public status of our streets. I requested immediate reimbursement for the tow. Miss Albright's response was swift and predictable. She fired back an email, again CCing everyone, accusing me of defiance, disrespect for community standards, and harassing the HOA. She asserted that the streets within Old Mill Creek Estates were quasi-private, subject to HOA oversight for the common good. She even attached a scanned, poorly cropped photo of my van from a month prior, circled in red. Her closing sentence was a flourish of self-importance. The board stands by its decision to enforce parking regulations. This was it, the official declaration I needed. The trap was set. I did not reply to Miss Albright's email. Instead, I compiled a comprehensive dossier. It included my copies of the city's official street map, the original 1972 CC and RS, the property management company's internal communications confirming the public nature of the streets, and every single email detailing Miss Albright's demands and the HOA's hesitant attempts to placate her. Most importantly, I included her latest email, unequivocally stating the board stands by its decision to enforce parking regulations on what she claimed were quasi-private streets. Then I contacted a local real estate attorney specializing in HOA disputes. His initial consultation was free. He listened patiently, occasionally nodding, his expression growing more intrigued with each piece of evidence I presented. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Miss Albright," he mused, "has just handed you a winning lottery ticket, and quite possibly the HOA a bill for a few $100,000. He explained the implications. If the HOA, led by Miss Albright, was officially claiming jurisdiction over public streets to enforce parking, they were also claiming liability. Everything from potholes to streetlights, from road maintenance to snow removal, would now technically fall under the HOA's purview and budget, not the city's. This was the exact failure point of the Lakewood HOA lawsuit. An HOA claiming public streets as their own, then facing massive liability. The attorney drafted a formal letter. It was polite, professional, and devastating. It outlined the city codes, the original CC and Rs, and the irrefutable fact that our streets were public. It then presented Miss Albright's specific declarations, acting on behalf of the HOA, that they were enforcing regulations on quasi-private streets. The letter then demanded immediate reimbursement for my towing fees. It also included a detailed list of all the costs the HOA would now be legally responsible for if they maintained their stance: street resurfacing, traffic calming measures, storm drain maintenance, public liability insurance, etc., estimated at several $100,000 annually, all to be funded by homeowners' dues. It politely suggested that if the HOA maintained its stance, a formal complaint would be filed with the city and a class action lawsuit initiated by myself and potentially other aggrieved residents. The letter was sent via certified mail to the entire HOA board, the property management company, and Miss Albright. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was the president of the HOA, Mr. Henderson, a quiet man who had always seemed overwhelmed by Miss Albright's aggressive personality. His voice was trembling. "Listen," he stammered, "I just got the letter. This is a complete disaster. Miss Albright, she's been completely out of line. We just found out she actually called that tow company without any board vote, presenting herself as the sole authority. It was a complete fabrication. And her email, Mr. Henderson," I reminded him gently, "where she stated, 'The board stands by its decision to enforce parking regulations.'" He groaned. "She sent that herself too. On an unofficial email. She never got a vote. We never stood by anything. She just assumed." This was the climax. Her arrogance had led her to act unilaterally, then to lie about the board's support, creating a paper trail that implicated the entire HOA. She wasn't just wrong. She had deliberately misrepresented the situation and committed an illegal act. "The HOA will reimburse your towing fees immediately," Mr. Henderson said, his voice flat. "And we are officially rescinding every notice related to street parking Miss Albright ever issued. We're going to have an emergency board meeting tonight." The fallout was spectacular. The emergency board meeting was, by all accounts, a bloodbath. Miss Albright, confronted with the attorney's letter and the furious questions from other board members, initially tried to bluster her way out. She claimed I was slandering her, that I was the one causing trouble. But Mr. Henderson, emboldened by the attorney's stark warning and the potential financial ruin facing the HOA, pulled up her emails. He presented the city maps. He had even called Elite Towing Solutions himself, who confirmed Miss Albright had presented herself as the sole authorizing agent for the Old Mill Creek Estates HOA for my tow. The evidence was irrefutable, time-stamped, official, and damning. She tried to blame Sarah from property management, saying Sarah had misinformed her. Sarah, however, had her own meticulously documented log of every communication with Miss Albright, including repeated warnings about the public status of the streets. The woman had been told repeatedly by multiple sources. She had chosen to ignore them. Within 24 hours, Miss Albright was removed from the HOA board by a unanimous vote, not just for the illegal tow, but for gross negligence, abuse of power, and fraudulent representation of the HOA's authority. The HOA issued a formal apology to me, along with a check for my towing fees and a small additional amount for inconvenience, which I promptly donated to a local historical society. They also issued a blanket memo to all residents, explicitly stating that all streets within Old Mill Creek Estates were public and parking was regulated solely by the city. The irony was not lost on me. Miss Albright wanted to clean up the neighborhood. She ended up cleaning out her own reputation and bank account. Update: it's been 3 weeks. The neighborhood is quiet again. The HOA management company informed me that Miss Albright, facing the wrath of her former neighbors and a potential lawsuit from the HOA for legal fees, quietly sold her pristine home. The closing was expedited. Apparently, her perfect property values weren't quite so perfect when there was a cloud of legal trouble hanging over them. She packed her luxury sedan and departed as quickly as she arrived. Not a single wave goodbye. Good riddance. Update 2. Another month has passed. The HOA has since restructured its board, focusing on transparency and adherence to actual bylaws. My van still sits legally on the public street, a silent monument to Miss Albright's folly. I heard from a reliable source that Elite Towing Solutions is also facing some heat. The attorney I consulted mentioned he was looking into their practices, especially regarding how they accepted towing orders from non-authoritative sources. Seems Miss Albright's actions had a ripple effect beyond just our small neighborhood. Final update. 6 months down the line, Miss Albright has completely vanished from our collective memory, a cautionary tale whispered among new residents. The biggest news: the HOA, chastened by the entire ordeal, has established a new neighborhood improvement fund. Its first major allocation to the city for a grant to update and clarify some of those incredibly vague 50-year-old bylaws, ensuring that no single individual can ever again misinterpret them to such disastrous effect. Rules, after all, are only weapons if you know how to wield them.